Hello and welcome to Tisky Sour. It is the last day of our conference coverage. I'm ever so sorry we are 45 minutes late, but I think the reason is probably one of the few that you will happily accept. We were interviewing John McDonnell, so there'll be an interview going out tomorrow on socialism in the 21st century. In the studio tonight, what we're going to be talking about is Labour's new or not quite so new position on Brexit. And I could not be joined. I'm hoping for some rows tonight, maybe. We've got, of course, Ash Sarkar, senior editor at Novara Media.
Wagwan, Michael.
Oh, I'm all good. Dave Ward, general secretary of the CWU.
Hi, Michael. Join a union. You're a member, are you?
I'm a member of the wrong union because I could change jobs all the time. So what I need to do... Oh, actually, this is a good segue. To join the NUJ, I need more than 50% of my income to be from journalism. So please go to support.novaramedia.com so I can qualify to become a member of the NUJ. I'm also joined by Zoe Williams, who's presumably a member of the NUJ.
I am a member of the NUJ, yeah.
And a journalist at The Guardian.
Yeah.
And also a big deal in Another Europe is Possible.
I'm not a big deal in the sense that I didn't do all the phone banking. So I'm not a big deal in the sense of doing work, but I am a big deal in the sense of like I do their podcast and I did their Left Against Brexit tour and I believe in it. Yeah. I believe in Another Europe and I believe in them. So yeah.
Honorary professor.
Yeah. Like call me emeritus. Why don't you? I mean, I'm twice as old as them. That's what emeritus means.
How's everyone's conference been?
It's been really good. It's been knackering. There's not been quite as much free booze as I would have liked, but that is a completely separate complaint. The CWU laid on...
Good party, wasn't it?
Oh, it was great.
Was it awesome, your party?
It was
literally,
very good,
people were killing themselves to get into it.
We had Hugh Grant turn up.
I was killing myself at the
Hugh
party.
Grant.
Yeah.
Hugh Grant. It was like Berghain. There's like a queue of people getting turned away, getting let in. It was
and then
chaos.
Hugh Grant coming in. But there were these like machines. So there was like a bucking bronco. There was like a surfboard thing. And there was one called the Tornado, which is the one which has fucked me up really. Which is there's like a big pole coming out like that, and then there's a low one coming out like that. And it's going around and you've got to jump the low one and duck the high one, which I'm quite clumsy anyway. So I think that the repeated head and knee injuries hasn't done me a lot of good. I've actually really hurt my knee.
You went back and did this on successive occasions.
I did this.
We've got it all on film.
I did this in front of people. I was like, am I not a woman of the people? Am I not? Am I not?
Wow.
So that was my note.
Times have really changed.
There's another... Obviously, we're going to get onto whether or not Labour is the party of hard remain in a second. First of all, I want to ask you, as a general secretary of a union, there's been some commentary about members versus the machine or momentum versus the unions, especially when it comes to party democracy. How do you... what's your take on all of that?
Well, first of all, we've got a foot in both camps. So we
you're one of the few affiliated
to Momentum, and so we had a really big debate on that within our National Executive Council. I recommended it, we agreed it, and we took it to our conference, and we had a debate at our conference, and it was clear to us during the 2017 election, when Momentum went on the attack, and we liked some of the things that they were doing in terms of campaigning, in terms of being willing to go out and win seats that, the mainstream machine of Labour as it was then, were on the defensive. And we just really like some of the stuff they do, the vibrancy of it, the reality that it makes us think differently about things as well. So we support where Momentum are going. And I personally support very much the need for members to have a greater say in the democracy of the Labour Party. And if I put that into a trade union context, I'm going to say the same thing. I want our members, I want us to engage more in members. So I can't separate that point. This is me. I think, though, that they've got to be careful to recognise that the trade union movement is a great thing. It's the voice of organised workers, and it has to have a role. And I think there's a little bit of manufacturing going on about the row. And actually sometimes what you need is a proper debate on it. So we've had the debate in the context of the democracy review. And I think that was always going to go in the direction that it did, and I understand that. What I'd like to see is a positive debate now on the role of trade unions. And I'll tell you what I would say. I would say that trade unions have got to earn their right. I'm not a fan of some of the hierarchical structures in trade unions where, you know, we basically loved the relationship with the leader of whoever was in charge of labour, whatever they were doing. And we didn't actually engage our own members in politics. Yeah. And what we're trying to do in the CWU is turn that around, to bring it from the bottom up. We're trying to engage members in politics, but through their industrial workplace issues. You've got to earn the right to talk to your members about politics. So I understand why that debate took place. We are where we are. You know, we supported Jeremy's position, the NEC's position. And I think we've got to have a more positive debate next year so that, you know, we don't have the type of disagreements that seem to appear at conference this year.
So to push down on that slightly, so you're sort of saying the Momentum need to sort of understand the central role that unions have in the Labour Party. But I suppose what a riposte to that could be that the way that some favoured reforms got watered down was in favour of MPs, the PLP. So one of the things that Momentum was arguing for was the 10% or 10% or 10% to get on the leadership ballot, but we've kept the MP veto.
You have to unpack that a bit. Nobody.
Sorry.
I mean,
no, our audience are a bunch of geeks, right?
I know they are geeks, but like that's the problem
I wanted
with
power taken away from the PLP.
Yeah.
That had to happen.
So yeah, to explain that, you're right, Zoe.
Yeah,
You're the professional
you know what?
in the room.
You know what? Our
in the room.
audience understands it. You understand it. I don't fucking understand it.
So we talked about this a bit in the first episode of the conference series. Before this conference, to stand as the next leader of the Labour Party, you would need 10% of the PLP, 10% of MPs to back your nomination. Jeremy managed to get 15, but that was when they all thought he had no chance of winning. So the worry is that if you think a left candidate is in with a shot of winning, you're going to have MPs a bit more reluctant to sort of give away their endorsements in the way that they did before. So some people, including Momentum, were arguing you should take away that MP veto by saying all you would need is 10% of MPs or 10% of trade unions or 10% of CLPs. And then the NEC decided, and depending on who you speak to, it's sort of the causality is different, but either Lotto wanted it. I don't know why Lotto would want it. That's the leader of the opposition. Sorry, another thing. Or the trade unions wanted it to stay at 10% plus 5% of the unions or 5% of CLPs.
I don't see it as win or lose. I see it as a direction of travel. The franchise has been extended. The power of the PLP rightly has been reduced. And, you know, what I'd say to people is don't see things as win or lose. Let's build things. Build democracy in the Labour Party. Build more members. Make the unions earn the right to engage their members to be part of that voice. I'm up for that. But don't fall into the trap that somehow we're all against each other, which I think the forces that are behind that, I don't think that's the leadership of Momentum. I don't think a lot of people in Momentum believe that. I think sometimes those forces go back to, you know, other things that have gone on in the past that perhaps are not the future, you know.
I really
so
agree.
we agree
with
we
that.
need to change.
There's a kind of hard bed of stuff that nobody remembers why it is the way it is, that people are defending for historical reasons that, like, none of us understand. And I, you know, the deselection stroke mandatory reselection argument really reminded me of that, because if you listen to it from inside the kind of political machine, mandatory reselection sounds like a vendetta.
That's why we renamed it Open Selections.
Open selection.
Yeah. Well, no, that's why I was calling it open primaries for a bit, which doesn't make any sense at all. But, you know, it does sound like a vendetta when it's presented through the optic of the people who've always understood it. And it's only if you make the mistake of just going back to first principles that you realise it's just a completely legitimate question. Why should it be a job for life? Why shouldn't you get to choose again? But it's really difficult to break out of the norms.
I mean, I think one of the things that's worth remembering, because I think that you said something really important, which is look at the direction of travel, which is the centre of power in the Labour Party is tilting quite heavily towards the membership.
Definitely.
And that's a kind of
thing.
inevitable process. That membership is going to grow. The way that some of the votes on the conference floor went this year, if they happen again next year, might not be, the result might be very different. And I think rather than thinking of that as a set of competing interests, because I think one of the things that's made me feel very uncomfortable about this movement versus the machine kind of narrative is that it presupposes that you are either a member of the Labour Party or Momentum, or you're a member of your union. So your identity and the sense of political selfhood that you derive from your work and the sense of political selfhood that you have from your party political affiliation, these two things are somehow antagonistic forces. And I don't think that's how people make sense for themselves at all.
But isn't it the case that when people talk about the members versus the machine, they're not really talking about union members, they're talking about union bosses. And there is a perception of a real disconnect.
But I also think it'll be...
There was a time, there's no two ways about it, there was a time when trade unions have gained the system. And they've done that not in the interests of people in the country. They've done that often for reasons that, they was on the wrong side of the argument. They protected people who needed to be called out, needed to change policy. And it's a world that we need to move away from. But that does not mean that you attack trade unions who organise fantastic things. They're representatives that stand up on the front line to defend workers. They're great things. And by the way, I'm not having a go at other trade unions. I think at the moment in the UK, I think we've got some of the best group of trade union leaders we've had for a long time, who are starting to do things differently. So these things can come together. And what I think you need to do is find room for a positive debate. I'm all for the direction of travel that says give the members greater say. I see that from Momentum's point of view. I see that as an individual member of the Labour Party. I would see it as a member of a trade union. Give the member... I went out on a ticket. When I got elected, it was on a ticket of we're going to engage members in a completely different way.
When were you elected, by the way?
2017, I think. No, 15. Sorry, 2015.
Oh, so you're fairly new.
No, I've been around a long, long time, but I've become General Secretary in 2015.
Oh, that's what I meant.
Been a rep since about 1980.
I knew you weren't 3 years old.
I think I am.
Do you want to find a point before we move on to Brexit?
That's your problem.
I guess what I'm saying is that I think that if we keep seeing things as oppositional and talking past each other, we're never going to have a movement which is effectively keeping Labour leadership to the left. And I think that's the thing that we have to keep in the frame all the time. And I think that where the Labour Party has been more adventurous, more bold on policy, more bold on workers' rights, keeping together a union bloc vote will become more challenging unless union leadership starts getting on board a little bit more with democratising some of these processes. But I don't think that that's an antagonistic position. I think that's a conciliatory position. And it would be really worth keeping an eye on it in 2019, 2020, so on and so forth.
Well, on the issue of members and trade unions, we're having a kind of like hippie loving, where so long as everyone understands each other, it's going to be fine. I wonder if we come to the same conclusion when it comes to a second referendum. The big news today was Keir Starmer, who in his speech said that Remain would have to be on the ballot. Or he said they're not ruling out Remain being on the ballot, but he'd personally like Remain to be on the ballot and then would then vote Remain if we were to have a vote on the deal. This directly contradicted John McDonnell, who a day previous had said that though the Labour Party would support a second referendum, Remain wouldn't be on the ballot. It would be about the deal or no deal. John McDonnell's comments yesterday were in response to a compositing meeting the day before, where a motion had been constructed from 150 CLP motions, and alongside the trade unions and the front bench, that had come to a fairly ambiguous thing that sort of Labour would support Labour would keep open the possibility of a public vote in the event that the Tory party's deal falls in Parliament. So there's been a bit of a struggle over what that public vote means. Now it's formal policy to back it. This has had different responses. So obviously the media response to Keir Starmer doing that was to say that this is a massive lurch of the Labour Party to a sort of hard Remain position. Keir Starmer's particular line about the fact that Remain would have to be on the agenda got a pretty big standing ovation. So I think it does make it difficult to sort of see this as a a stitch up from the Labour Party, right? There was obviously a lot of demand for what Keir Starmer had said from the conference floor. Some responses. Steve Turner, who's the Assistant General Secretary of Unite, so is often seen to be channeling the position of Len McCluskey. He got up on the conference floor after Keir Starmer and said that Keir Starmer had been wrong and that the Labour Party should not put Remain back on the agenda because that would be rerunning the referendum. Later in the day, Corbyn backed up Starmer and said what Starmer said is just Labour Party policy. That's a normal understanding of the motion. So it's all a little bit confused, but it basically looks from today compared to yesterday that Labour is in a position where it's more open to a second referendum where Remain would be on the agenda and reversing the Brexit vote than it was prior to Keir Starmer's speech. What do we think of that? I'm going to go to you first, Zoe.
Well, I mean, I've got so much to say. I'm going to have to put my beer down.
Hold my drink.
Someone hold my drink. First off, it's not Labour. Labour is open to a second vote. It is Labour is. If we don't get a general election, then we need a second vote, and that is now the position. So that's quite a major thing because everybody on that hall wanted a general election, but it's not in our gift with the Fixed Term of Parliaments Act. It's not in our gift, and we won't get one unless we get given one. So we are now committed not just to remaining open to a second vote, but to getting a second vote. That's massive. Having Remain on the ballot is massive, and in that compositing meeting, however you
this is probably something I should explain. If you've watched the previous ones, you'll know. You can do it.
I can do the compositing motion. So basically, 150 CLPs came to conference with a motion on Brexit. That's really unusual for 150. It's a quarter of all CLPs to come with one issue. I can't remember it in my political lifetime. But probably 65 of them were another Europe is possible motions, which is kind of hard Remain, hard left, open borders, the works. Another 20 of them were Remain Labour, which is just kind of like us but not as cool. Probably some of them were People's Vote and Labour for a People's Vote. I think a handful were pro-Brexit, but it was just a handful. It was 7 or 8. And the compositing meeting basically had to boil them all down into one motion. That went on for 6 hours. Apparently, at one point, they took a comfort break, and Keir Starmer said, "Okay, when we come back from our break, we all need to agree what consensus means, because you can't do it just by majority. You have to do it by consensus." So, I mean, I actually don't know what it means, but somebody must. So it was
anarchists in southeast London circa 2012, like these endless meetings.
I know, but it's amazing they kept it for 6 hours, right? They had to do that. But the point is that meeting, and they spent about 2 hours removing final vote on the terms of Brexit from the text, because there were people in there who thought it was so important, whose loyalty to the Corbyn project was so intense that they just did not want to put him in a position where he even had to countenance a Remain option.
So is it fair to say what the leadership, so that compositing meeting, the leadership are involved? I mean, Corbyn obviously wasn't there, but sort of like some of his aides
They have one shadow cabinet member in there, and that was Keir. And then everybody else is either a CLP delegate or a union delegate, or that's it. Nobody. 400 possible people were allowed in that room. Only 150 people were. Partly because once it started, you're not allowed to enter the room once compositing has started.
But who wanted it to be a vote on the terms of Brexit?
Oh, that was the GMB, wasn't it?
The GMB, well, I don't know. I think they moved their position a little bit. They was on that line at the TUC, but I think they moved back a little bit from that, and that was certainly my view of Tim Roach's contribution. Wasn't it one of those debates where there's lots of different views in the room? Some quite polarised, and we were always going to end up voting for the same thing at the end.
Really? Is that right? Is that how it felt?
I think, because, let me make this clear. There is no way that I would support a second referendum on the same terms of the debate that has divided this country. I think it is a stupid thing to even contemplate, and I really passionately believe that it is the only card that the Tories have got of getting out of jail.
But what's the because the CWU colleague in conference was really in favour of the motion, right, on the conference floor?
Yeah, because what the motion did for us, and look, it was composite meetings, whatever you want to do, a deal was done to sort of try and give Jeremy the right to lead. And I think that was the most important thing of the motion, is that we need a political leadership where Jeremy has the right to exercise political judgment as this debate unfolds. And I really feel strongly about this, that because what's going to make the most difference, and I think that's the theme of conference, that's what's been people have been saying, what the motion says is, number one, is we are going to fight tooth and nail to get rid of the Tories.
Yeah.
And they got us in the mess of Brexit. Outrageous when you think of it now.
It is outrageous.
The way where we were all arguing and they're getting away with it. I'm in the Danny Dyer club on that one.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it is horrendous that they've left a mess in this country. But here's the point I want to really make firmly on this, because I can't get this out of my head, the way that I think about these things. And that's this. When people talk about protecting workers' rights and jobs, I keep sitting there saying, don't treat the British worker as though they don't know what's going on in the UK at the moment. And if we're really serious about a fight for workers' rights, it starts in the UK and it starts now. And I think some of the people, I've got to be honest with you, I know that you will have a strong view on that for all the right reasons, and I'd probably share a lot of your views on that. But I am convinced that some of the people who are in the campaign to remain are the same people who, when they were in government under New Labour, did not lift a finger for workers' rights.
I just want to do a clarification on your position before we move on to the next bit of debate.
Can I ask a housekeeping point?
Yeah, go on.
Am I allowed to vape?
Yes,
Okay.
you're allowed to vote. The question was, so, Labour's position, would you be happy with a second referendum on the terms of Brexit if it was just deal or no deal?
If you're asking me as somebody who's negotiated many deals, I wouldn't go near it at the moment.
Yeah.
I would really, because I think as soon as you actually accept that that's a sequential thing and we're going to go for it, you take your eye off the main prize. Now, I'm not saying, and this is a difficult moment, let's have some truth and honesty about the reality of politics and what's in everybody's interest. And what Jeremy wants is to unify people in this country.
Yeah.
And I, as a trade union leader, feel very strongly that my job is to unify workers, whether they voted in our own union, leave or remain. If I can't offer them a vision of the future that is more than a Tory Brexit or the status quo, then I don't think I'm doing my job. And Labour know, and this is what's frustrating about this, we have sat in this conference this week with the greatest set of policies that will transform the lives of people in this country, my family, your families, workers, millions and millions of people. And we're having the debate dancing on the head of a pin about what might happen in Brexit, and we're taking our eye off the fact of what's happening in the UK now.
Let's go, Ash then, Zoe.
So I am referendum ambivalent because I feel that there have been certain questions which haven't been addressed or haven't been answered. I would prefer to remain inside the EU. I voted remain and I probably would again. But I feel that because we have kept these conversations largely contained either within the Labour Party or within a media setting which is broadly more sympathetic to Remain and also very hostile to Corbyn, it means that we haven't actually, I think, interrogated the mood of the country elsewhere, which is that, one, if you put Remain on a three-way ballot, it will be interpreted as splitting the Leave vote, so trying to sort of get out of leaving the EU through a form of cheating. Two, I don't think that the dial's been moved significantly on the way in which the image of a loss of control of your political life has been racialized. I think that there was a perception of a victory. It fell down people's list of priorities, but still those images of race, immigration, national decline, those are still very, very prominent parts of the political imagination. And three, no one's told me actually how you're going to go about winning it, and importantly, whose minds are going to be changed. I can foresee winning it because lots of people who didn't vote would subsequently come out and vote Remain. I can see winning it because lots of people that voted Leave last time, like, I don't know, die or something. But I
Not
don't.
the most enticing campaign slogan, is it?
just being like, the slogan for, like, you know, Ref Mark II would be like, "Are you dead yet?" But
I'm fine with that.
But I don't see that minds have been changed. I don't see that what's happened in the past 2 years has been a process of conversation and negotiation on Brexit. What I've seen is the hardening of two positions, and where people have come together is on the economic vision being offered by Jeremy Corbyn.
So I agree with some of that, and I really disagree with the last bit. It's not two polarised positions. Remainers have got more Remainy and Leavers have got more Levy. Leavers haven't got more Levy. Most Labour members who voted Leave has slipped right down their priorities. So now it's not a salient issue for them. It's something like fifth. Most very hardcore Tories and UKIP have remained very Leave. What has happened is that the actual project has been revealed as a far-right project, right? It is a racist project. It is a project
but we knew that at the start. We knew that in 2016.
Yes, but we didn't, we assumed that they would have a plan, that they would have some kind of systematic way of going about it, that they would be able to agree amongst themselves, that they wouldn't hurl the nation off the cliff. We assumed that we wouldn't be talking about a complete tearing up of workers' rights, a deregulation of everything that we've worked for, a loss of capital controls. We assumed that they would have some reasonable middle way plan. There has been no middle way plan, and it is a far right project. And so I don't think that Remainers' positions have hardened. I think what's happened is a thing we thought was bad to begin with has transpired to be absolutely appalling.
This is where I disagree, is that I don't think that we didn't know these things back in 2016.
Well,
I think we did.
No, come on. I mean, the practical ramifications, not very many people knew. Do you know how many times the word customs union was used prior to the referendum?
But still no one understands the customs union.
I know, but at
there's
least...
this idea that,
at least
people now see that the customs union and the single market is difficult, so they'll vote in a different way.
But
no one knows what
where
it
it did come up, that was known as Project Fear. What I'm saying is that some of these things
but
were known, but the reception of those things was intensely hostile.
No, a lot was not known generally. But to answer your point about what the campaign would look like, originally the original Remain campaign was either Project Fear or it was protect the price of beans. It will be cheaper for you to stay in the EU. Now, that is not an inspiring vision. There was very little about what the EU is capable of. There was very little about the EU being the only set of institutions ever established.
How are we going to change that debate?
Well, then you campaign.
If you have a second referendum,
on the basis
public vote, how are we going to... Yeah, but if the Tories are in control of that vote, the most important thing, and I'm 100% focused on this, is getting rid of the Tories.
Sure. Everybody wants a general election
why
first.
would you give them they've messed everything else up in this country. I think people know that. I think people are fed up with politicians, as I said at the rostrum the other day, who tinker at the edges, many of them who were in power in New Labour's days.
But hang on a sec, wait, you think by demanding Remain on the ballot, we're giving them a gift of attacking us?
No, what I think is that there's only one priority. There's only one opportunity. And if you could convince me, Zoe, that by having a vote, and I don't know what the question is, and we got no control over that, they got control over that somehow that is going to get rid of the Tories, then I'll sign up to it tomorrow.
Oh, Jesus. I mean, if you had a vote and the question was a three-way...
We're probably dancing at some point on the head of a pin.
No, look, I really
it's
don't...
It's about joining up workers.
So
why would you not try to unify workers? Where Jeremy's right is what he said. I saw one interview with him after the vote, or just before, I think, when we all knew what the result was going to be. And he said, my job is to unify working people in this country.
But
Remain
actually...
or leave, not just working, but everybody in this country, we want to unify. And Labour has got the vision to do that. So you have to set the Brexit debate in that context.
But you can't...
what the domestic agenda is. If you don't do that, you're making a grave error.
A couple of things.
For the wrong reasons.
A couple of things. That's absolutely right. Brexit was a vote for discontinuity. It was a vote against the way things were. It was a vote against the status quo. I would not be interested in fighting a Remain campaign if it weren't shackled to a Corbyn government. I would not be interested in fighting a Remain campaign so you could go back to business as usual circa 2008. That doesn't interest me at all. And I do believe it was a vote, and I do believe the reason Take Back Control was so powerful. It was not because anybody really thought the EU was controlling their lives, but because there was this kind of perception of impotence in the face of, the forces of impoverishment. And we wouldn't have a case if we weren't intending a transformative programme. We wouldn't have a case at all.
No, I accept you.
But the broader point there, though, right, is that, so say if you look at this Labour Party conference and you say the project of the left is to unite the working class.
Yeah.
Sort of all the people who've been screwed over by neoliberalism.
Yeah.
You look at John McDonnell's speech yesterday, you're like, that is a speech that can unite the working class, where anyone who's been screwed over by neoliberalism, who doesn't have power in the workplace, will listen to that speech and be like, well, obviously not necessarily, but it's a basis by which you can organise all those people. Say like, yes, this unites people screwed over by neoliberalism. You look at Keir Starmer's speech the next day, where he's making some real sort of leanings towards Remain. Sort of like he's saying Remain will be on the ballot paper. He's already said that morning on the radio that he would vote for Remain. That's not a speech that unites the working class.
Can I just
write down 50%, like it'd be 50-50 of the working class saying like that's a good speech, that's a bad speech.
Can I just make 2 points? Firstly, Keir Starmer's speech was responding to the composite motion. This is democracy in action. This is a new Labour Party. I've genuinely never been to a Labour conference at which a composite motion was brought and it changed the leader's policy. This is an absolute light bulb moment for me. It's massive. It's really exciting. That is party democracy. Secondly, though, there is no transforming workers' rights within one set of borders. If you want to transform workers' rights, if you really want to resist the forces of neoliberalism, you have to do it across borders. You have to do transnational cooperation. Otherwise, Amazon moves from Germany to Poland, which they did. You can't organise in those 20th century ways.
Insecure employment in the UK today.
Yeah.
In my view, the most pressurised working environment in my living memory.
Yeah, outrageous.
Where, as I often say, like workers today, every single day of the week, whatever job you're in, I think the vast majority of workers face the daily grind of an employer, a boss saying to them, how can I make you work harder? How can I make you work faster? And how actually can I do all of that for less?
Yeah.
That's the reality of work today. And my argument is let's not run into this debate because it plays into the point that Ash made, that's how you start to get people blaming migrant workers. When we start to pretend that started in Europe, now that started here, and we've got to do something about it. The trade union movement, by the way, my view is the trade union movement needs to lead a fight for a new deal for workers in the UK. And I think that sits alongside the transformative agenda that Jeremy has set out. It's absolutely the right time to do it. We've got to stand on our own 2 feet and do that, and we've got to bring about change here. My point is, and you can't lose sight of this, we cannot be blind to the reality of what's going on in the UK today by sounding like, I've got to say, this is how it feels sometimes, that we want to have a fight somewhere else. But we don't want to look what's going on here.
Ash.
Mum, can I say something? So, this is going to sound a bit triangulaty or whatever. But personally, in this case, I'm Team Fudge. I was chatting to Tom Cabassi shortly before we went live, and he was saying, look, if it was Tony Blair that had managed to, put together a holding pattern which was keeping together a social coalition that included Leave voters from deindustrialised areas and Remain voters in London, people would be hailing him as a genius, whereas for Corbyn, that's being perceived as, lack of leadership, lack of principle, the rest of it. I agree with you when you say it's not in the gift of the Labour Party to decide when there's a general election. Similarly, it's not in the gift of the Labour Party to decide what's on a referendum ballot and how and when that happens. Yeah, I think that the right thing to do strategically has been to, and I know that this sounds like speaking in cliches and I'm not trying to do that, but to keep all options on the table, because you don't know when a government's going to fall apart or what the choreography of that is. Okay. And I think that calling for a referendum is only smart when it is a destabilising tool.
Well, okay. The thing is, strategic ambiguity did work. It worked in 2017. It worked for the rest of 2017. But at some point, you have to say what your offer is as a party. You cannot go through. You're incapable of properly opposing what's going on if you haven't got a position yourself.
But do you think we do that now when we don't know where in the election cycle we are?
Well, no, of course we don't know where in the election cycle we are, and of course we want a general election, right? We're all agreed here. The thing we want is a general election. And the thing we're all agreed on is it's not in our gift to decide when it is. And nor is it in our gift to decide whether there's a people's vote and when there's a people's vote. But you have to have if you don't have a position yourself as a party on whether you want to kick the decision back to the people and what decision they're allowed to make, then it's impossible for you to oppose. Now,
No, and the position of the party that's been taken by the vote is, let's just see what happens, and then we'll do something or other.
That's not the position.
I think that very much is, and I'm very pro.
Genuinely, that's not the position. The position of the composite motion is, in the absence of a general election, when we vote against Theresa May's deal, then we take it back to the country. That is the position. So it's not like all options open. There is no possibility of Starmer's 6 tests being met. There is no possibility of the Labour Party voting for Theresa May's deal.
The key point of today,
yeah,
and I've been in many compensating motion meetings, and I've been in many meetings where you write motions, and I've sat at home writing motions. The point is all of those people who submitted the various composites sat in a room with Keir Starmer. You've explained that already. I wasn't actually there because I had a feeling it'd end up in a fudge, right? And sometimes, if you have an objective in mind that is so important to the future of this country, to change this country, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity which Corbyn's leadership offers that we all fought for, that is bigger than anything.
Of course it is, yeah.
And at some point, you have to have and accept that political judgment. See, I don't want people who are responding to the media, and I think the media's position on this is weird. I watched the headlines. The headlines are written, and they want people to come in and us to split ourselves up over what the headlines are, and they've already written the headlines. We're having a second referendum. That's not what the motion said. My point is is that all of those people who were passionate about a second public vote, and I accept that is not what they're saying is second referendum, but I think you're dancing on the head of a pin. They sat in that room and they agreed that composite. So they agreed that it was right, and this is the main point to take from this debate. Jeremy Corbyn now has the right to exercise political judgment on this issue.
We're going to move
really
on,
important.
to be honest. We're going to take an Ash point, and then I think... Are you going to talk about Diane Abbott's speech briefly?
I think we should do questions, personally. I've just got one last thing to say about why I hate Brexit, and I do hate Brexit, is that 52% of those who voted to make 100% of the country fucking unbearable. And that's what I hate most about it.
I don't think they knew how unbearable it would be.
Oh, they knew we would be this way. They knew.
All right, let's see.
Okay.
Are we going to get any questions in?
Have you not got questions now?
Well, we've only given them 30 seconds. It takes longer than that to type a question, doesn't it? Come on.
Well, I guess in the meantime, Diane Abbott's
Tell us about Diane Abbott's speech, Ash.
So it was actually really focused on issues around police justice, which is an utter delight to me because, rightly so, in the kind of wake of the Windrush scandal, she's been focused on immigration policy. She has pledged to shut down Yarl's Wood and Brook House with a wider review for the system of immigration detention more broadly. And I think in terms of rhetoric, I think she's been, trying to shift the dial about, why is it migrants get treated in a certain way and what does it mean to be racialised as a migrant. That's been really good. Although, of course, I think room to go a hell of a lot further. In her speech today, she focused on two things. One was responding to the Spy Cops scandal. So this is something which has had nowhere near the amount of press attention that it should have. It should have really been on the front page of every single newspaper in this country, and it hasn't, which is that with very little oversight, next to no judicial oversight, the Metropolitan Police, planted undercover officers in activist movements using the names of dead children, and many of these officers went on to have relationships, even children, with women who they were surveilling, and also committed crimes while undercover as well. And this is something which the Metropolitan Police have not apologised for or really taken any action on. So Diane Abbott, I think, could have gone further on this, but what she has said is that for undercover operations, the police will have to get a warrant from a judge, and they will be limited by time, and there'll be much stricter oversight over what it is these cops get up to, because you need a warrant to raid a house. Well, why don't you need a warrant if you're letting a cop in your house and you don't know he's a cop. So I think, that's a positive step
I
forward.
thought you were going to say something like, why don't you need a warrant to raid someone's womb?
No, I mean, you shouldn't. The warrant shouldn't allow you to raid a room. I'm still an anarchist at heart. I'm just like, no, that's just because the law says it's okay doesn't mean it's fine.
All right, we've got some questions. What are the roles of unions in a world without work?
Well, we'll all have a lot of time off, and we'll hopefully all have a lot of money to spend on our leisure time. Look, I think that it's a great question. So we know that we've faced the fourth industrial revolution, the gig economy, AI. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to fight for a share of the benefits of that. And that fight is at the centre of a lot of what John McDonnell, Jeremy have been saying about basically socialism, where we challenge, for a long time coming, but let's challenge the growing power and wealth going into the hands of the few. It's happening in the UK, it's happening in Europe, it's happening across the world. So what we have to do is get a deal that does reduce the amount of hours that people work generally. That does mean that you don't lose pay when you do that. And that we actually use that. I use this thing where I say, like, workers face two futures. One is where we just accept that the likes of Amazon, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple create more and more power and more wealth for themselves. Or the other is, and by the way, what they do then, they give us the scraps. Insecure employment becomes the reality for all workers, not just in the UK, right across the world. The other is where workers come together, trade unions need to lead that fight, and we get a bold new deal for workers. And we share in the benefits of that. And that's part of socialism. That's part of why we're supporting John and Jeremy's vision for the future. So we've got to take it on. You can't stop it. I mean, our industry, we've seen it. You know, can I say this? I know going on about this, but this is massive. If you take what's happened in Royal Mail, a company, what is a great company, you know, great workers, go to every single city, town, village, little lane, wherever the most remote areas in the UK, we go there every single day. We know that the world that we used to have thousands and thousands of jobs with, delivering letters, is not going to sustain those jobs. So we want change.
Yeah.
Postal workers want change. But don't write off that whole industry.
Yeah.
This is what's great about Labour's vision now. I've sat in rooms with people like Mandelson, where, you know, they tell you you're a basket case. Had no ideas. The only idea he had was to sell us off. Actually to companies in Europe that he probably had a stake in somewhere, sitting behind the scenes. The people you talk to now, they say, do you know what, we could expand the role of a postal worker. You could be really important to our integration in what we're trying to do in communities, to what we're trying to do with small businesses. That's new thinking, that's new socialism.
I've got a question for Zoe, and then we're going to go to final points. Slightly shorter show than usual today, because we started a little bit later, and I've already told you why. So, no complaints. You can watch a fabulous interview with John McDonnell tomorrow.
The socialist silver fox.
You know what? Actually, I'm going to do before asking Zoe Williams a question. I'm going to appeal to our beloved audience. You, of course, know that we are running a fundraiser at the moment. # Novara Living Wage. We love what we do, but we want to do it more often. And we want to start to be able to pay everyone who is involved in the Novara Media project. So please, we're asking you to donate 1 hour's wage a month. So go to support.novaramedia.com and encourage all your friends, encourage your family. Subscribe to this on YouTube. Share this video on Facebook. And whatever you can think of, you know. Every little helps, as Tesco once said.
I mean, it's
Or as Dolly Parton says, it costs a lot of
she
money
say it
to look
first?
this cheap.
Ah, good. Excellent. Zoe, the question for you, and then we're going to do final points for everyone. What will you do if, after having taken this position, and Labour, at least in the media, being identified more strongly with Remain, the polls start to plummet?
It's a good question. I don't think they will. All the data at the moment is that Labour would get a net 1.5 million votes if they came out more strongly for Remain. So that's even taking into account all the people who would not want to vote for them if they took a Remain position. They get a massive boost from this. So my feeling is that the polls will go up rather than down. Like if they do,
well,
okay. So
I don't buy that data, but it's final points moment.
But-
so
but
it's not
no, but listen,
time to make that.
Listen, if the polls do go, I believe it's the right thing to do. And I've been coping with Labour tanking in the polls because I think they're saying the right thing for as long as Jeremy Corbyn's been leader rather. So I'm not watching the polls biting my nails, God knows. And I think everybody who's been saying for the past since 2015, I don't care about polls, I care about the vision. Maybe should use a bit of that energy if that happens, but I don't think it will.
Dave, final points.
Lead the charge for a general election. Get behind the leadership of the party. Let them make the right political judgments. Let's unify workers. Let's get rid of the Tories.
Ash.
Fudge it till you can't anymore.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us in our Labour Party conference coverage. This will be our last live daily show for a while. There will be more interviews going out on the YouTube tomorrow and probably a little while into the future as well. As ever, please support the work we do at support.novaramedia.com. Thank you as ever, Ash Sarkar.
Thank you, my love, Michael Walker.
Oh, I like the way you're talking to me tonight.
I'm very tired.
Dave Ward.
Yeah, thanks. I
Absolute
enjoyed that.
pleasure.
Really good.
Let's
Really
get you
good.
on again soon.
Yeah, it'd be good.
And Zoe Williams, we'll get you on all the time, but we'll keep doing it.
Now you have
'cause
to
it's
say
a
that to
pleasure.
me, otherwise it looks like I'm like the black sheep.
What do you mean?
But
No. The proof's in the pudding, Zoe. I invite you all the time. We're going to go
we
to
too
the...
are hard left, hard rain, apart from Michael, who's soft left, hard Brexit.
Yeah, kind of. Soft left heart. No, I mean, I'd say... Well, anyway, that's another podcast. Anyway, this was Tisky Sour. We are Novara Media. Good night.